Welcome to Resume Well. We're exposing the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. We've been told that the antidote to professional burnout is personal wellness, and sometimes that means confronting our inner skeptic and exploring the taboo anyway. This season, we're all about putting our intuition to work at work. Hello, and welcome to Resume Well. I'm your host, Courtney Page, and here on Resume Well, we explore the intersection of wellness and career success. Today's guest is the absolute perfect person to tackle that enormously complicated topic. But if you're struggling from burnout, fatigue, and anything in between, even that stubborn weight that maybe you just can't seem to shed regardless of doing, quote, everything right, this is the episode for you. So our guest today is a pharmacist turned functional health coach who is on a mission to help women understand their health and transform their lives. After witnessing the shortcomings of the conventional medicine that we all are very familiar with, after witnessing all of that firsthand as a pharmacist, Farah Jamani discovered that true healing requires a holistic, evidence-based approach. So as a relentless problem solver and a dedicated coach, she really pushes her clients. And I know this because my best friend, and that's an understatement, she's more like a sister, was one of her clients. And she was like, you have to interview Farah. So I know just from what she's told me that Farah really pushes her clients beyond their comfort zones while providing unwavering support. And she firmly believes that mastering the control of your health, mastering your own control of your own health is infinitely more valuable than relying on medication alone. Through her innovative root cause ResetRx program, she equips people with the tools and the confidence that they need to reclaim their well-being, which sounds wonderful. She's helped hundreds of clients release excess weight, I love that phrase, and boost their energy, improve their sleep, and rediscover self-love. Farah has guided countless individuals towards a vibrant life that they never imagined possible. In today's episode, Farah and I are going to dive deep into optimal health and how it can fuel career success and personal transformation. Farah, thank you for coming on Resume Well.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
To get started, I always like to start out by asking people, if you were at a dinner party and someone was like, oh, hi, I'm, so-and-so, who are you? And you were like, oh, I'm Farah. And I just feel like people always ask, like, what do you do? What would be your response?
I think of it in the easiest way. I teach you how to eat, how to think, and how to live to have your optimal life. So whether that is you want to break through burnout, whether it's you want to balance your hormones, whether it's you just want to feel that vital energy that you've lost somewhere along the way, I teach you all the ways of how to do that.
That sounds amazing, first of all. I want that. So I want to go back in time a little bit because you were a pharmacist, which doesn't sound super holistic. I mean, you're like back there kind of like counting pills, right, for people? Yep. Just tell us about that journey from a pharmacist to a holistic health coach.
Yeah. So my journey started when I was in community pharmacy, and I've been a pharmacist for over 2 decades, 1 decade of which I was in senior level management and operations. When I was practicing in the pharmacy, I was seeing women coming in who were feeling tired, who were feeling fatigued, who were not feeling great in their body, and who were having symptoms, but their doctors would tell them, well, your labs are normal. And I don't really know that you have anything wrong with you, but here are some options: a sleeping pill, antidepressant, or birth control pills. And I was the pharmacist who was this neighborhood community pharmacist who wanted to talk to their clients. And they would say, I don't want to take these medications. I don't feel like that's addressing the root cause of what's going on for me, but I don't know what is going on in my body and I don't feel myself. Through that same time frame, I was going through my own health journeys. And conventional medicine had the same answers. Your labs are normal. We don't have a lot to offer you. And I thought there had to be something more going on, that it wasn't just me, it wasn't just our age, it wasn't the women I was seeing in community pharmacy. So I started to go on my own path for myself, but also for the women that I served to figure out what is this root cause of what's going on. And that led me into functional medicine. Functional medicine, we look at systems in the body versus conventional medicine looking at the body in silos. And so when you start to connect the web of all these moving pieces that are happening in your body, you can start to see very clearly where some of those imbalances and friction is. And functional medicine believes that your body wants to come back into balance. You just need to give it either the tools to do so or remove the friction that's creating the imbalance. And so now that's what I help women do, is remove that friction, create the balance, and your body does what it wants to do, and is actually able to heal itself.
Yes, I love that. I love that you're talking about balance, because I think that's something that we all strive for in general, right? We're like, let's, work-life balance. We hear that all the time, but I don't think we associate that with our health, and it's so important. So what, if at all, what is the intersection between pharmacy and holistic health? How has your pharmaceutical background influenced what you do now? And are there any elements where those worlds like really work kind of surprisingly well together?
Yeah, and I take a really integrative approach. I think there are some camps where it's all conventional all the time, but it's also all holistic all the time. And I don't think either extremes are where you're going to find true health for people. I think sometimes you need the bridge of medication to either get you through, to provide that symptom relief, to get you to feeling some level of relief so that you can do the foundational work. But you can't just give medications without doing the foundation, because once you start to remove that bridge, you're left with nothing. So those worlds can definitely connect together, and they often work best in synergy together if needed. Where I was seeing some limitations within pharmacy was people who were just wanting the medication, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's their choice and their path. But there's some women who really wanted this holistic solution, but they were suffering on their way there because they weren't taking the bridge. So now we connect both worlds together to allow you to have the relief whilst also helping your foundation of health.
What was your approach when women were coming, especially from the holistic side? Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like just listening to this, that it would kind of be easier for someone who is game for that more conventional side to kind of dip their toe in the holistic side. Whereas, because I come from a background of yoga, so I'm just thinking of people in my circle who I know, I feel like they would have a much more difficult time getting on board with like going on a medication as opposed to vice versa. So what is your approach with someone who comes from wanting to be, very holistic and natural, but they really need that support in medication? How do you approach a client like that?
Everyone is going to be on their own path, and it's about meeting them where they're at whilst also giving them what they want. And so for me, it's having that conversation of, you want this solution, you want this symptom to be gone. Amazing. Here's what we can do to help that. But here, let's be realistic of how long that's going to take. And do you need to have anything to help you on the way? And if you don't want to have medication, that is completely fine. You don't need medication. But sometimes it just provides that relief. Usually I don't see it coming from that world. I see it more, I want to have a holistic approach. I don't want to have medication. How do I do that? And that's where I help support them.
So that's really interesting. And vice versa, if you have somebody who is really like not into the holistic side and they're I don't know if they would, if you get those types of clients, if you do, and you're like, look, this is actually really helpful. How, is there a way, like, do you have to convince people, or is it more like, okay, I'm going to meet you where you're at, and then you kind of like introduce them to the whole idea of functional health and medicine?
I think there are stages of change that people enter into when they're coming into a health journey. And moving them along those stages is super important, but also recognizing at which stage they're coming in. Most people come to me when they want an integrative solution. They've exhausted what conventional medicine has to offer. They're not getting the relief they need. They're not getting those symptom improvements. Now they want something different. When I was in pharmacy, yes, you're going to have those people who are like, just give me the medication. That's all I want. Okay, that's great. But let me just sprinkle in to just open the door to your knowledge of maybe showing you that there are alternative pieces that you can do to reclaim that control back in your health. But most people who come to me really want that new solution. They want that integrated approach.
Mm-hmm. So many of our listeners are high achieving women. And I know that that's kind of where you specialize. Yeah. And they're really struggling. And you talked about balance. So I love this. So they're really struggling to balance, their health and their very demanding careers and family. What have you found to be the biggest misconception that they often have about about their own health transformation or health transformations in general?
I think this illusion of balance is just that. It's an illusion. We aren't going to always balance things. There's not going to be this even amount of time given to work, given to family, given to career, given to personal development. But where I think what women really want when they're saying they want balance is they want resilience and they want capacity to hold all of what life offers. So by giving them that, by building up their physical body, their emotional body, and then their spiritual body, to figure out how do we build more resilience? How are you able to take the hits and keep going? But how are you also able to build more capacity into your system to have a richer, fuller life that almost feels like it's effortless in your performance without having to be so prescriptive in this illusion of balance?
Yeah, I think that's, oh my gosh, that like hits because it is. It's like it's the whole thing. It's like we're trying to have it all and then you really can't. It's like you can't have it all at once, right? It's like you can, but in little bits.
I think that you can feel like you have it all because I think what that means is I want it all because I want this beautiful, rich life. Okay, let's understand what's important to you in that. Let's understand how are you defining success in that and what does that mean? Because your version is going to be very different than my version.
Right.
And how do we allow you to have that building on that physical foundation of health to give it to you first? When you're struggling with exhaustion and you can't get out of bed, you are not having balance and you're not thriving in life.
Right. So what are like the biggest things that people come to you for?
Oh, people come to me a lot for exhaustion and fatigue, feeling burnt out. And most times they're coming to me because they hit 40 or they've hit some time frame in their life where things are starting to shift and they don't understand what shifted. Their diet hasn't changed. Their exercise hasn't changed, but they are way more tired. They're way more hormonal, irritable, and they're starting to get that fluff around their midsection. And they're like, I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't feel vital anymore. It's like a light switch went off and now I don't know where I am.
All at the same time? Or do you get like 1, 2, 3 or people that come with all of those symptoms?
I think when you start to tease things out, most times they'll come to me because of the fluff. They're like the vanity piece. I want this gone. I don't feel good. Or I'm just so tired all the time and I don't know why. But when you start to piece all of these pieces together, you start to realize like your cells are just not functioning appropriately. Your body's not creating the same level of energy because there's that restriction and friction in it.
Where does that restriction and friction usually stem from?
Yeah, what's the root cause behind it?
Right.
So
talk about the program, Farah. I love the name of it. I couldn't wait to get to it. Can you tell us what the name of the program is and tell us about it?
It's the ResetRx, and I think of it as a prescription to vitality. It's a prescription to reclaim your health and therefore transform your life. So the program is divided into almost 3 distinct phases. The first is we really have to reset your foundations of health. And so then we start to look at what are the foods that you're eating, or how are we sleeping? How's your gut? How are your hormones? How's your detoxification? Those actual foundations in your health. And a movement, let's throw movement into that as well. Then we go into that next phase of, okay, how are we managing emotions? How are we stepping into self-leadership? How are we managing that stress regulation in the nervous system? Because that's often that key friction point for so many women. And then the third phase is now we've created this whole new shift in you. You have more resilience. You have more capacity in your system. You're sleeping better. You're feeling better. You're looking better. Now it's stepping into this new identity of, okay, now how do I meet my new self? What do I want in this world? The patterns that I was running that are no longer serving me, do I want to still keep running these patterns that are exhausting me? Or am I wanting to do something new? And so many women come through this program and they've had this huge empowerment shift that they want to change careers. They want to change all different things in their life because now they finally feel like themselves. They finally have taken ownership back. And so now they step into this new phase of their life with compassion, with grace, with this new awareness and wisdom.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think when you started that first phase, it's kind of like all those things that we know like are the issues. And for whatever reason, we are missing, the components like as a whole. And then the second phase, can you reiterate the second phase again?
Yeah. And so I'll go to the first phase first. Yes, we know we need to do them. but there's so much confusion out there about what's the best way to do it.
Yes.
So I like to distill it down for people. And yes, there is some personalization within it, but a lot of those components really focus on your metabolic health, getting your blood sugar down, resetting some of those foundations in your health so that you flip that metabolic switch, that now your body's making better energy. That second phase then is really about stress and emotional regulation. It's stepping into your own self-leadership and power and starting to be able to look at your nervous system and understand, where is it? Is it feeling activated and really on? It's stuck and on, where a lot of our ambitious women are. Or is it feeling more collapsed? And I just don't have the motivation to do anything. And how do we bring you into this middle Goldilocks zone where the healing happens, the calm happens, the creativity and the joy all happen? And it's understanding your mindset around things, the patterns that you run, but also how do you manage your nervous system on a day-to-day basis to kind of bring that temperature down of stress overall so you have room to grow.
So taking those two types of women, the one who is always on and the one who has more of a collapsed nervous system, let's start with the first one. What have you found? And I know it's like a huge generalization. Everybody's different. But if someone is listening to this and they're like, I am type A, like that is me. What is the first step that a woman like that could do to just try to, come back to either baseline or just come back to a normal, not normal, I don't want to say that, but more at peace nervous system?
Strangely enough, it doesn't start with the nervous system per se for these women.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So thinking about being stuck and on, thinking about, we often say when women are ambitious, they're stuck and on, their first thought is, well, I have to deload my plate. I need time and space. I need a nap. I need a vacation. I just need my stress off my plate. But most of the time they can't do that. So how do we bring more, I keep saying capacity, but how do we bring that in? So I think about it, how do we lower the other stress fires? So we know stress comes from a physical source, a mental source, and an emotional source. If we can't impact the mental and the emotional source by deloading their plate, how do we bring down the stress fires from a physical source? Most of these women I see come in are probably not eating enough. They're probably moving
They're not
too
eating
much.
enough.
They're not sleeping enough. And so you're running on too little for too long. So here's where we start to bring the stress fires down, but from a physical perspective in your body. That actually gives you energy. It makes you feel like you can take on more. And then some of those mental and emotional stressors don't feel as impactful as they would have before because you've managed some of the physical stress fires.
That's interesting. And what about type B, who, they are having trouble finding, they're probably tired, right? And probably just that is, contributing a lot to not being able to feel motivated or get motivated, and they look like they're lazy, but they're just, but they're not. There's probably something else going on. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, that is me, I like doom scroll on social media and I'm just tired all the time.
Yeah.
But I have ambition, what is usually the underlying cause for that? And again, huge generalization, but just for someone listening who identifies with that, what would you say to that?
Yeah. So that was my story. And that's why I got into this world, because I had run on for too little for too long. And think of it like a car running on the highway. If you don't refuel it, you don't change the oil, you eventually end up on the side of the road with your hood up. And so that's where this sort of burnout picture comes from. So most of these women who are collapsed scrolling, doom scrolling, they are super ambitious. They have so much to give, but their body is just needing so much care and rest. And they're like, I just can't anymore. So for those women, very similar. It's let's re-nourish you. Let's start to get you actually getting quality sleep. Let's start to reset some of those circadian pathways. All of this to say is, how do we use the light and the dark appropriately? How do we look at how much you're moving during your day? Is it too much? Okay, let's start to scale it back. The process is very similar. It's just where on the spectrum those two women are. The super stuck and on woman is still moving and grooving, doing all the things, but she's eventually going to be that collapsed woman if we don't intervene. And so the whole process is very similar of bringing down those physical stress fires to reset their foundations of health, so then they can start to feel. And so for this woman, very engaged again. And for the other one, less stuck and on, less on fire.
Yeah, to come to that kind of middle point on the spectrum. That is really interesting because those women that are always like going, they always end up getting like sick all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of people I know and I'm like, why are you always sick? But they're just going and going and going. And eventually you're right. They're gonna flatline. I mean, not flatline for real, but like they're just gonna hit a wall and become that woman, you know, who is just completely burnt out. But what is so unique about burnout with women in today's world? Like, why is it? Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is something that you could Google, right? But it's so like you just get so many. It's like, oh, you know, the patriarchy or something, but
Not untrue.
which is not untrue, right? And is definitely a contributing factor. But what is so unique about burnout with women in today's world?
Oh gosh, there's so much. There's so much.
I know. See, that's why it's like you Google it and it's like it just becomes too like crazy and it's hard to distill like what is not biased or opinionated, you know. So it'd be interesting to get your take on this because, you know, this is your bread and butter and this is what the Reset is all about. And just having a very good friend of mine go through this program with you, you know, and have you as a coach, she's amazing. So I just want to dispel all your knowledge. I want to leak it out of your brain.
All right, let's talk about burnout. Why is this so ubiquitous for women? Sure, we can talk about the patriarchy. I feel we all understand that we are living in a society that does not honor us as women. It does not honor our cycles. It does not honor our capacity and how much we're able to give. It expects more and more and more. We have full-time jobs, either at home and outside of the home, but we're expected to do it all together. I think I saw a stat that mothers have, like, I think it works out to like an extra job and a half on top of their full-time job. No wonder we're exhausted.
Right.
We're living in a super toxic environment. I don't just mean toxic from like the food and the water and the air, but we're living in a really holistically toxic environment where you go on social media and you see only everyone's highlight reels. Mm-hmm. And you're bringing that in as a confirmation bias that, oh, I should be doing that. Well, let me go and do more and try harder and look a certain way. So we have that pressure on ourselves. You know, Gabor Mate uses a term that women are the shock absorber of society, and we are the emotional shock absorber. You know, we are the ones that got hit the hardest through the pandemic. We are the ones who 80% of autoimmune conditions come to us. Yes, there is some genetics to it, but it's also the environment through which we live. And so there's so much that goes into burnout, whether it's our own expectations, our upbringing and patterning of people pleasing and perfectionism. That is an amazing tool for ambitious women, but then it becomes this double-edged sword that contributes to this burnout piece. Mm-hmm. But then we start to look at our modern food. It is mostly nutritionally devoid. There's so much confusion out in the space of what should I eat, when should I eat it, how should I do it? And so there's so much conflicting evidence coming through. And so if you have a genetic tendency towards sickness, if you are living in this modern society, you don't have supports, it stands to reason that most women are going to have some level of the spectrum of burnout at some point in their life. Layer hormones into the mix, hit your 40s, all things start to shift. And that is an actual time where your brain is starting to shift, your body is starting to shift, and your resilience is just not there anymore because your hormones aren't there to support it.
What hormones?
So when we there's 3 stages in a woman's life: puberty, postpartum, and perimenopause, where we start to see these huge hormonal swings, huge hormonal fluctuations that we know impact the way your brain functions. So I see a lot of women come to me with the brain fog. The brain just doesn't feel like it's on. They can't find words. They're like, I used to be sharp, and now I'm very much not.
What happened?
What happened? And so in this sort of 40s, 35, 40 range, we're starting to see progesterone really start to decline. Estrogen start to become really wonky. And with all that shifting comes all of these challenges. Your brain just doesn't have the same level of chemicals in it. We don't have the same level of resilience to handle the stressors of our life. Mm-hmm. And so everything just feels like a lot. It just feels too much.
Can you go a little bit farther into progesterone and estrogen? And did I say that right? Progesterone?
Yeah.
Yes. and estrogen, and how, like, what is the difference? I mean, I think we hear about that if you have ever had a baby, you know, or been trying to get pregnant or something like that, you know, that's part of that world. But I don't know if I've heard them really separated like that in postpartum, you know, and not postpartum like right after you had a baby, because that's kind of all wrapped up in that. But like after you're done having kids, how do those still work together, and how does it affect, like you mentioned, brain fog or, you know, other symptoms of perimenopause?
Yeah. So we feel, again, that these hormones work in silos. Hormones don't work in silos. They work in concert together with other hormones. So when we think of, let's go to burnout for just a sec, we think of it with a stress hormone being high, okay? But with it, it takes up insulin, which is then disrupting some of your blood sugars. Your question was really around perimenopause and those hormones. So through a woman's cycle, through her entire life, she's going to have differing levels of progesterone and estrogen in her system. But in this sort of 10-year lead up to menopause, these hormones start to decline. And they don't decline in a nice sequential trajectory going down. Of course not. It's this zone of chaos. So if you remember puberty and how rocky and bumpy it was, well, it's the same thing on the way out. It's rocky and bumpy, and nothing makes sense anymore because your hormones are changing not in a regular fashion. They're all over the map. Every month can be different. And so with this hormonal change comes a whole host of other changes. And I feel like this is a conversation that we don't often hear enough about. I feel this whole menopause conversation is definitely starting to open up.
Yes.
But we don't hear about all of these shifts, like the changes that happen in your gut, the changes that start to happen in your brain, some of the other like brain chemicals or neurochemicals, neurotransmitters that start to decline because estrogen is going away over that 10-year transition. And so most of the symptoms, I'm going to say 80% of the symptoms that we are experiencing, whether it's brain fog, exhaustion, anxiety, stress, all of those pieces, right, those can happen in our 35 to 40-year range and before menopause. But what we kind of signal as this menopause piece is night sweats, hot flashes. Well, there's so much more associated with it. And so the question is it true burnout? Is it hormonal shifts? Sure. It's all of the above. But when you really start to get into, okay, how do I start to help you from a root cause perspective? The pathway doesn't change. We're not, yes, we can talk about perimenopause and hormones and all the rest. And that's something you should really be speaking to a practitioner about how to manage some of that. But when it's talking about those foundations in health, those don't shift. We still need to be eating properly. We still need to be having a lifestyle that supports us. We still need a mindset of being able to manage the emotions and stress.
Right. And I think something that I've noticed with my friends and myself is the foods that used to work for you might not work for you anymore. And the mindset that used to work for you might not work for you anymore. Like in your 20s, you can kind of just like hit it and go. You can get like 5 or 6 hours of sleep and be fine. And now for me, at least, like, absolutely not. If I get 6 hours of sleep, I am useless the next day. Like just absolutely useless. And I used to be like, I used to brag, like, I can not sleep and be fine. You know, I can stay up and like wake up early and it's fine. And I definitely can't do that now. How does this is kind of a left field question, but I think it is interesting. This whole thing is very interesting in regards to women becoming pregnant later in life. So if we're hitting perimenopause between 35 and 40, that's the general age range, but women are having babies later because of career and all of those good things. How do those hormones play? Like, I mean, how does that, that's a huge complicated question. Yes. I realize that. But, you know, we're all told that after 35, it's much more difficult to get pregnant. The chances of everything are lower. The chances of abnormalities in the fetus are higher. But how does it work with the hormones delving into perimenopause, but you're also trying to get pregnant? I mean, is it impossible? It's not. We see it happen.
It's not impossible, but we do know it's challenging. We do know it's hard. There is a reason why they say that after 35, it is more challenging to do it. Our egg quality is lower. Our egg reserve is lower. Hormones are starting to shift. Not impossible, but in that, let's understand that those hormones are starting to shift, but what is picking up the slack are your adrenal glands. And so when your ovaries are quietly quitting, your adrenals are having to pick up the slack. We realize we live in a super stressed environment where our adrenals are getting overtaxed day after day. And so they don't have a lot of reserve. So this is why we're seeing so much challenge in the 40s, because there's nobody there to pick up the slack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah, because it's so difficult to go after the career that you have been working towards, and especially, women in leadership positions that have really like put everything into their career and still want to be a mother. It ends up happening, in the later half of 30s or early half of 40s. And so it's really interesting how it all works together and comes together. While I was preparing for this, I was interested to know if there was a type of career or a specific industry maybe that a lot of your clients come from.
I don't want to say a specific industry, but I will say overall, they are professional women who are ambitious, who are in leadership roles, who want it all. And there's nothing wrong with that. And they can have it all. But understanding what all means to them, I think is very key to understand, and not being swayed by what they were brought up with or what society thinks is all, but what does all mean to them? And that's where we talk about that in that third stage of my program of understanding what are your values? What is success? How do you define it? Because now you actually feel well, your inflammation is down, your brain feels back on. Now you can think about those pieces. And it's going to look different for each woman who comes through my door. But the common thread is, I have so much to give. I want to be able to impact this world. I want to have abundance. And that is entirely okay. And how do we get you there? How do we give that to you?
Right.
Because you deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful that you have so many women with that need and want. With that, what is the biggest or most common self-limiting belief that those same women who have that desire to give and create, what is their biggest self-limiting belief?
Well, it's a great question. Their self-limiting belief is that the only way to get to where they want to be is through hustle and grind. There are no other ways. So they're running these really toxic patterns of holding themselves to such high standards, to having this perfectionistic streak. Most of them come in with this level of people pleasing as well, but it's almost this forcing and pushing and doing mentality. Whereas if we can stop to give their body a bit of a break, but also let them lean back, also let them be, and having them start to connect the dots to, I don't have to hustle and grind. This can be easy. This can be in flow. This can be simple. And that's a hard thing to be able to navigate and believe when you're in the midst of it all. Right? Because if you're at the car on the highway driving at 100 miles an hour, you don't know that there's a way to go slower and also get to your destination.
Right. Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about, retraining your brain and all of that. One thing that I was looking at when I was researching you, was challenging habits, right? So a lot of this kind of boils down to healthy habits. And a lot of the time, myself included, we'll start and we're excited to do the cool new habit that we decided was going to change our life. And we start it and then, we fail. And maybe we are, it's a personality thing and we're just not great at keeping habits going. Or maybe we decide, we come up with an excuse of some sort. So we've all been there. We've all done it. We've all tried and failed multiple times. But how would you approach that? If a client came to you and was like, that's great. You have all these great habits that I need to start, but I've tried XYZ and it's it just doesn't stick. I have a really difficult time with it. How can we create lasting changes as opposed to just the hamster wheel of, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail?
Well, you're talking about two different things in there. Yes, habits, which we'll talk about, but you're also mentioning momentum. When we start on something, right? January 1st is going to be coming up soon. Everyone's going to be motivated. They're going to be really high on this motivation scale. And then life happens and they start to trough out. And they're like,
yeah, I think it's
this
like
didn't
by
work.
mid-February, everyone's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say mid-January. Everyone's off that bandwagon. But I want to teach that motivation comes through momentum. So you can be as motivated as you want, but until you gain momentum, that is going to push your motivation further. So it's almost like you just have to keep going. You know, you go to the gym, you're not going to go to the gym twice and be like, oh, look, I've gotten huge muscles. No, you keep going. So instead of looking at the finish line of what is that going to look like, let's look at what are those process habits that I have to continue, which over time is going to get to each of my result. And that's where coaching is very important. It's very hard to keep yourself accountable and motivated and keep going. So through my coaching, I will always start with what's going well. Let's start to unpick why that's going well. What did you have to tell yourself to get there? What is it about that feels really important to keep going? And that accountability, support, the coaching, understanding the levers that you're pulling is what's going to keep that momentum going until that reaches the motivation to carry on. The other piece to what you were asking, though, is how do you create this habit in the first place?
Right.
Right. And so we know with habits through lots of research that you need a trigger, you need the habit, but you also need the reward. And reward is different for each person. So certainly maybe it's you're starting to implement a habit. And I always will teach it to let's create a habit stack. Let's tack it onto something you're already doing that is going to also be that trigger for you. So maybe one of the things I will have most women do is get some morning sunlight before screens. Because we know with that is going to start to set your energy for the day. It's also going to allow you to get some great quality sleep. But when it's cold in Canada, nobody wants to go sit outside. So maybe you use the sunlight or whatnot. But it's how you get that ingrained. Well, most of us have a hot drink in the morning. So let's do those habit stacks. You know you're going to be having your coffee. Take it outside if you can. Sit with it in front of a light. There's your trigger, is your coffee. You've created that habit stack to it. And now what's your reward? Okay, well, maybe for the first little while, you actually need a true reward, but your reward will differ based on what you're getting from it. Maybe your reward is just, oh my gosh, like I can actually get through my morning. Holy moly, I love that.
Right.
Maybe for you, you teach yoga. Your reward is at the end of that, you feel so good and light and like calm through it. That in itself is a reward.
Right.
But for some other people, maybe it's, I can't wait to have my hot shower after I work out. And I'm going to make it so lovely, use beautiful things in my shower. And that's my reward. Until these habits start to feel like lifestyle. Through the 12 weeks in my program, my whole goal is teaching them the tools of a lifestyle. So it's not a quick fix. It's not a detox. This is how do you shift your metabolism, but also how do you shift your lifestyle to create the reset lifestyle. And what elements are really important for you are going to differ than somebody else. But you assemble your own toolkit and therefore you assemble your own habit stacks.
Right. How long, and again, I know that this is, it depends on the person, but I think we've by now all heard, you know, especially with New Year's coming up, we've heard 21 days is like the master day of habit creation. Like once you hit 21 days, you will never, ever like not do this thing, right? Obviously that is like super generalized and untrue for many, but is there a time frame for somebody to work towards in regards to habit stacking?
The 21 days is such an illusion. I don't think the evidence or the literature shows any, and I could be wrong, any specific time frame for how long you have to be in something to make this a lifestyle. I think it's going to also depend on what is your level of reward to all this? What is your ultimate goal? So usually when I start working with someone, we really drill in, why is this so important to you? Well, I want to lose weight. Cool. Why? I just don't feel good. That's not going to keep you motivated in the hard days. But once you start to drill down what their true value add to it is, usually comes down to some level of self-worth, confidence. Once you start to pinpoint why this is so important, once they start to attach that leverage, then it becomes exponentially faster and easier to do it. Mm-hmm. Building in tools like the habit stack, building in tools like the celebration at the end, all make those go much faster than this sort of idealized 21 days.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to note that none of those rewards that you mentioned were food. I love it. Which is good because I think that's where my mind immediately went. I was like, oh, maybe it would be like a really like good breakfast or something. But I think it's easier to make it something that you're also already going to do, right? So if it obviously like a lot of people shower in the morning. So I love that where it's like just use like a really expensive soap if that is what you're into, you know, or take like an extra 5 minutes in the like nice warm steam, you know, something like that, because you're going to be there anyway. So it's not adding on an extra thing that will then like make it even more unrealistic to do. So
there's no extra barriers to it.
Right.
And coming from the space of burnout, it's like, listen, I can't have a checklist. I can't have one more thing to do.
Nope.
How do I ritualize this? How do I make this feel good to me? And therefore then keep going. We also feel good.
I know. That's the hardest part when you like don't feel good, but you have to keep going. I love that. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask, you know, if there's anybody listening here who is really interested in functional health, but they're, you know, not a doctor, and they're considering a career pivot and they're interested in it, what advice would you give somebody navigating that kind of career pivot?
I think it's such an important career pivot. I think it affords you so much value add to yourself, but also to other people. So start to do a little research. Start to follow some of these accounts, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's podcasts, that are talking about those elements that you're finding super interesting. From there, it's okay, well, how do you want to see this trajectory out? As a pharmacist, as a healthcare professional, I was afforded various different streams to go into because I was a healthcare professional.
Right.
If you're not, that's okay. But how do you want to see this? Is it for yourself? Is it to impact others? That will then decide of how you start to get into it in a more concentrated form. But even now, like there's so much information on the internet. There is so many tools that you can access. Just start to delve into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how, just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you know, how was that transitioning from something that is very, you know, traditional pharmacy to something much like the Wild West, where it's like there's no rules, there's no structure, you know, how was that? Was it difficult, or were you just like, yeah, let's do it, like I am game?
It was, I'm not going to lie, it was a challenge. I am very much ruled by certainty in so much of my life, where being an entrepreneur, there is no certainty.
Right.
But I also know my values are through autonomy, they're through impact, they're through education. And I also knew that I was not gaining that by staying stuck in pharmacy. So having shifted into this new space, this is where that self-leadership comes in. I coach myself every day. I have to get up to do the work. But the reward that I get back to seeing shifts in people's lives, to impacting women in a really deep way, keeps you going. That's when you find a way. It's not easy, but nothing good is easy.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a good note to end on. I love that. Farah, thank you so much. You were wonderful. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you really want to bring up?
Oh gosh, there's so much we can talk about.
I know.
You know, I think that the overarching theme is so many women that I saw in the pharmacy field were giving their power away, whether it was to physicians, whether it's to supplements, whether it was to drugs, whether it's to whatever they found on the internet. Being able to reclaim your own power and start to become the CEO of your own health is so transformational. And knowing that there is a way to do it where you're not outsourcing your power, you're reclaiming it for yourself, because that's what's going to start to shift your life, shift those around you, and impact all of the people that you connect with. I think it's really important for people to know they can have what I kind of coin as this effortless performance, whether it's at home, at work, and in life, by building up that resilience and capacity in their body first, and then being able to shift it to the rest of their life.
I love it. Thank you. Mic drop. Awesome. You need your own podcast. I would listen. Thank you so much. If you are interested in working with Farah, we will include all of her links in the show notes. You can also follow her on Instagram at
_holistic pharmacist.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Farah. And thank you everybody for listening, and stay healthy, stay happy, and resume your life well. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Resume Well, where we explore the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page and on LinkedIn either at Courtney Page or at Resume Recruiting and Development. Join us next week, and in the meantime, resume well in everything you do.